Hey there, welcome back. I'm here to help you relax tonight. Before we slip into the shadows, like and subscribe to uncover more stories like this. Let me know in the comments, where are you listening from and what time is it there? It really brings our community together. Now dim the lights for that cozy vibe and stick around till the end. Let's dive into the unknown. The Vermilion Valley Bait Company operates out of a collection of muddy fields about 40 miles northwest of Portland, Oregon, where the soil runs dark and rich with decades of organic matter. Most people don't know that the night crawlers in their tackle boxes come from places like this. Commercial worm farms where crews work through the night, harvesting by flashlight when the worms surface to feed. I've been picking worms for 3 years now. The pay is surprisingly decent for what amounts to crawling around in wet fields, and the work suits my temperament. No customers to deal with, no office politics, just me, the mud, and thousands of writhing invertebrates. But there's a reason Vermilion Valley burns through workers faster than any other operation in the Pacific Northwest. When I was hired, the site supervisor, a weathered, compact woman named Ingrid Volkov, handed me a laminated card along with my collection bucket and headlamp. Her pale blue eyes, almost colorless in the fluorescent light of the equipment shed, locked onto mine with uncomfortable intensity. "These rules are non-negotiable," she said, her voice carrying a faint Eastern European accent. "Break them, and I cannot guarantee your safety. Follow them, and you'll make good money with minimal risk." At the time, I thought she meant injury from equipment or maybe environmental hazards. 3 years later, I understand she meant something else entirely. Rule 1. Never harvest the same plot 2 nights in a row. Rotation schedules are posted daily and must be followed exactly. Rule 2. Use only red filtered light. White light agitates the soil. If your red filter breaks, return to the equipment shed immediately. Rule 3. Any worm that feels warm to the touch must be thrown back immediately. Do not place it in your bucket. Do not examine it closely. Rule 4. If you feel the ground pulse beneath you, like a heartbeat or breathing, move to a different plot immediately and report the location to Ingrid before your next shift. Rule 5. Certain plots are marked with white posts at each corner. These are permanently off limits. Never cross into these areas, even to retrieve dropped equipment. Rule 6. If worms begin to arrange themselves into patterns or shapes against your palm, close your hand gently, return them to the soil, and leave the field for at least 20 minutes. Rule 7. Should Ingrid or any supervisor order a harvest of a white-posted plot, you have the right to refuse and leave the property immediately. This refusal will not be held against you. I thought these were the paranoid safety protocols of an eccentric owner who'd spent too many years in the mud. But then I experienced the rules firsthand, and I learned that some soil has memory and some things that burrow aren't merely escaping the light. It happened during my second week. The November rain had been relentless, turning the fields into a quagmire of standing water and sucking mud. Despite the conditions, the worms were surfacing in huge numbers. It's after heavy rains that they're most active, desperate for oxygen as their tunnels flood. I was assigned to Plot 7, a section near the western edge of the property, where an old growth forest created a dark wall of Douglas firs and hemlocks. The plot had good drainage despite the rain, and my bucket was filling rapidly as I worked methodically through the rows. By midnight, I had collected nearly 3 pounds, well above quota. was reaching for what looked like a particularly large night crawler when my fingers closed around something that made me recoil instinctively. The worm was warm, not cool and slightly moist like every other earthworm I'd handled, but genuinely warm like touching skin. Rule 3 immediately flashed through my mind. I opened my hand, and the thing dropped back into the soil. In the red glow of my headlamp, I could have sworn I saw it burrow with unusual speed, moving with purpose rather than the blind meandering of a normal worm. My hand where I'd touched it tingled uncomfortably. Not painful exactly, but wrong. Like that pins and needles sensation when circulation returns. Except it didn't fade. I continued working, trying to shake off the unease. But 10 minutes later, I grabbed another warm one. Then another. Within half an hour, perhaps 1 in every 10 worms I picked up registered that disturbing warmth. I decided to call it a night. As I stood to leave, bucket in hand, I felt it for the first time. The ground pulsed. Not shook or trembled, but pulsed. A slow, rhythmic expansion and contraction, exactly like the rise and fall of a chest in sleep. I froze, feeling it through my rubber boots. An unmistakable sensation that lasted for exactly 7 beats before stopping. Following Rule 4, I reported to Ingrid the next afternoon before my shift. She was in the equipment shed reviewing harvest logs in a battered notebook. When I told her what I'd experienced, her expression tightened. Plot 7, you said? Western Edge? She flipped back through several pages of the notebook. How many warm ones did you find? Maybe 20 over the course of 2 hours. Ingrid nodded slowly, making a notation. That section has been more active lately. The threshold between plots might be shifting. Threshold between what? I asked. She looked at me appraisingly, as if deciding how much to share. The plots with white posts, the forbidden ones, they're not off limits because of contamination or property boundaries. They're off limits because what lives there shouldn't be disturbed. Sometimes, though, the boundaries blur. Things migrate. Things? You mean the warm worms? Among other manifestations, yes. Before I could press further, another worker arrived for their shift, and Ingrid dismissed me with instructions to work plot 12 that night instead, on the opposite side of the property. Over the following months, I learned to read the subtle signs that indicated which plots were in active phases, as Ingrid called them. The frequency of warm worms, the quality of the soil, how it clumped or crumbled, the behavior of the regular night crawlers, which would sometimes avoid certain areas entirely, leaving bare patches in otherwise productive fields. I also learned that I wasn't the first to work here long term. There had been others, though most lasted only a few weeks before quitting. Ingrid mentioned them occasionally. Corey, who'd worked 6 years before moving to Alaska. Fiona, who'd managed 2 years before taking a job at a fish hatchery. And others whose names came up when certain plot behaviors repeated. It follows patterns, Ingrid explained during one of our pre-shift briefings. Cycles that repeat every 7 to 9 years. We're in a heightened period right now. That's why I need experienced people who understand the rules. What happens during these heightened periods? I asked. The boundaries become more permeable. The white-posted plots exert more influence on the surrounding areas. We have to be more careful. But what is it? What's in those plots? Ingrid's expression clouded. My grandfather purchased this land in 1947. It was cheap. Nobody else wanted it after what happened in 43. He discovered that the soil here produces exceptional night crawlers, among the largest and most robust in the country. But there were conditions, agreements made with previous custodians of the land, rules that must be followed. Who were the previous custodians? Indigenous families who'd maintained certain practices for generations. They tried to explain to my grandfather what lay beneath certain sections. He didn't listen carefully enough at first, lost 3 workers in the first 2 years before he learned to respect the protocols. She never elaborated on how those workers had been lost, and I never asked. It was a still night in late spring of my 2nd year. The rain had finally stopped after a week of downpours, and the fields were heavy with moisture. Every plot was producing exceptional numbers, and Ingrid had called in the full crew to maximize the harvest. 6 of us work in different sections simultaneously. I was assigned to Plot 15, a mid-sized field adjacent to one of the white-posted forbidden plots. I'd worked near the boundaries before, but never this close. I could see the white posts glowing faintly in my peripheral vision, marking corners of a roughly rectangular section, maybe 40 yards on each side. The harvesting went smoothly at first. The worms were plentiful and normal, cool, active, responsive to my red-filtered light. My bucket filled steadily as I worked my way through the rows. Around 2 a.m., I noticed something odd. The worms in my latest handful were arranging themselves as I lifted them, twining together in what seemed like deliberate patterns. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but as I opened my palm under the red light, the pattern became unmistakable. They'd formed what looked like letters or symbols, something structured and intentional. Rule 6. Return them to the soil and leave for 20 minutes. I gently placed them back on the ground and stood, intending to take a break by the equipment shed. But as I turned, I saw something that made my breath catch. In the forbidden plot beyond the white posts, the soil was moving. Not from worms surfacing, this was different. Large sections of earth were rising and falling in slow waves, as if something massive was breathing just beneath the surface. I should have looked away, should have followed the rules and left immediately. But I was transfixed by the sheer scale of the movement. An area at least 20 feet across undulated with that same slow, rhythmic pulse I'd felt before, but amplified, visible and hypnotic. As I watched, thin tendrils began emerging from the soil. At first, I thought they were roots or plant stems catching the light oddly, but they moved with too much intention, too much coordination. They rose perhaps 6 inches above the surface, dozens of them, all emerging simultaneously from the pulsing area. Then I realized they weren't tendrils. They were worms, but far larger than any night crawler, each maybe 3 feet long and thick as my thumb. They swayed in unison like a field of sea anemones in current, all oriented toward the same direction, toward me. Paralyzed, I watched as they slowly bent, curving until they were all pointing directly at where I stood. For several long moments, nothing else happened. Then, with horrifying synchronicity, they began to descend back into the soil, not burrowing randomly, but moving together like fingers curling into a fist. The pulsing intensified, the rhythm changed, becoming faster, more urgent, and I felt it through my feet. That familiar sensation of the earth breathing, but stronger now, undeniable. A hand grabbed my shoulder and I nearly screamed. "Don't look at it!" Ingrid's voice was sharp in my ear. She'd approached from behind, moving silently across the muddy field. "Eyes on the ground, walk with me slowly." She guided me away from the boundary, maintaining a firm grip on my shoulder. We walked perhaps 50 yards before she let go. "What the hell was that?" I managed, my voice shaking. "Something old and very much alive," she replied. "How long were you watching?" "I don't know, maybe 2-3 minutes." She swore in what sounded like Russian or Ukrainian. "Too long, it saw you, registered your presence. We'll need to do a cleansing." A cleansing? What does that mean? "Come with me." She led me to a small outbuilding I'd never entered before. Barely larger than a garden shed, set apart from the main equipment building. Inside, lit by a single bare bulb, the space was lined with shelves, holding glass jars filled with various substances. Salts, dried herbs, what looked like ash or charcoal, and other things I couldn't identify. Ingrid selected several jars and mixed their contents in a battered metal bowl, adding water from a plastic jug to create a thick gray paste. "Remove your boots and socks," she instructed. I complied, uncertain but too unsettled to argue. She knelt and began applying the paste to my feet and ankles, working it between my toes and around my heels with practiced efficiency. "The soil remembers," she explained as she worked. "When you stand on it, when you dig into it, you leave an impression, not just physical, something deeper. What lives in the forbidden plots can read these impressions, follow them. This will mask your trace, break the connection." "What would happen if we didn't do this?" She didn't answer immediately, finishing with my left foot before sitting back. "Dreams at first. You'd dream of being buried, of soil filling your mouth and nose. Then the dreams would start pulling you back. You'd feel compelled to return to that spot, to cross into the forbidden area. Eventually you wouldn't be able to resist. And then you'd become part of what feeds the soil, part of what makes it so productive." She met my eyes. "Do you understand now why the rules exist?" I nodded, suddenly cold, despite the warm spring night. "The worms forming patterns," she continued. "That was your warning. They were telling you to leave. The forbidden plot's influence was extending into the working area. You should have listened immediately." I did leave, after I saw the patterns, but not fast enough. You looked at the forbidden section. You made eye contact, in a sense. After the cleansing, Ingrid sent me home early, insisting I take the next 2 nights off. I spent those nights restlessly, plagued by exactly the dreams she'd described. Vivid nightmares of soil pressing against my face, worms crawling across my skin, the sensation of being pulled downward into crushing darkness. But the paste had apparently worked. By the 3rd night, the dreams faded, and when I returned to work, I felt no unusual compulsion to approach the forbidden areas. However, the incident had changed something. I became aware of subtle things I'd previously overlooked. The way certain plots felt different underfoot. Not just wet or dry, packed or loose, but aware somehow, as if the earth itself was conscious of our presence. The patterns in how worms distributed themselves, creating gaps and clusters that seemed too organized to be random. And I began to hear it. Faint at first, easy to dismiss as imagination or the wind through the trees. But on still nights when I was alone in a plot with only the red glow of my headlamp, I could hear something that sounded almost like whispering. Not words exactly, but rhythmic exhalations that seemed to come from the soil itself. I asked Ingrid about it during one of our briefings. "Ah," she said with a grim smile. "So you've started hearing it. That usually takes workers at least a year if they hear it at all. You're becoming attuned, Attuned to what? To what the soil wants to communicate. It's not language as we understand it, more like impressions, urges, warnings sometimes. Should I be worried? Only if you start understanding it. If the whispers begin to make sense, if you can parse meaning from them, that's when it becomes dangerous. It means you're too connected. That's when we'd need to do a stronger cleansing, or possibly end your employment. Has that happened before? Twice in my time managing this operation. Both times the worker had to leave. One managed to break the connection by moving to a different state. The other, she trailed off. The other tried to stay. Last I heard, he was in a psychiatric facility, insisting that the soil was calling him home. After that conversation, I tried not to pay attention to the whispers. But once you become aware of something, ignoring it becomes nearly impossible. The sound was there most nights, a susurrus beneath the normal sounds of wind and insects, rising and falling in patterns that felt almost like breath or heartbeat. Sometimes late in a shift, I'd find myself pausing mid-harvest, head tilted as if trying to catch words just at the edge of understanding. Each time, I'd force myself to move, to refocus on the physical work, to drown out the whispers with deliberate thought, but they were growing louder. Or perhaps I was growing more sensitive to them. It was early in my third year when things escalated. Vermilion Valley had secured a major contract with a national sporting goods chain, the kind of deal that could establish us as a primary supplier for the entire West Coast. The problem was the delivery timeline. They needed 500 pounds of premium night crawlers delivered within 2 weeks. Our typical production, even working at maximum capacity, was maybe 200 pounds per week. Meeting this contract would require harvesting plots more intensively than the rotation schedules normally allowed, and potentially opening up sections that had been resting. Ingrid called a meeting with the full crew, just 4 of us at that point, the only workers who'd lasted more than a few months. Besides me, there was Leo Ashworth, a grizzled veteran in his 50s who'd been picking worms for various companies for over 20 years. Cynthia Drexel, a sharp-eyed woman in her 30s who worked with mechanical efficiency. And Trevor Boone, a quiet guy about my age who rarely spoke but never missed a shift. This contract could change everything for Vermilion Valley, Ingrid explained, spreading a map of the plots on the table in the equipment shed. But meeting the quota will require adjustments to our normal practices. Leo frowned immediately. What kind of adjustments? Ingrid pointed to several plots marked in yellow on the map. We'll need to harvest these sections on consecutive nights. Double rotation on plots 7, 12, and 15. That violates Rule 1, Cynthia observed flatly. Yes, Ingrid acknowledged. It does. But we believe the risk is manageable if we limit it to 2 consecutive nights and then rest the plots for a full week. You believe, Leo said. Or you know? Nothing is certain when working with living soil, Ingrid replied. But I've consulted with my grandfather's journals. Similar intensive harvesting was done twice before. Once in 1953 and again in 1979. Both times there were incidents, but no permanent losses. What kind of incidents? I asked. Equipment failures, workers experiencing disorientation. One person fell into a drainage ditch and broke their arm. Another had severe nightmares for several weeks, but everyone survived and recovered. And what if it's worse this time? Trevor spoke up, surprising everyone. It might have been the longest sentence I'd heard him say. What if the cycle we're in now is more active than those previous periods. Ingrid met his eyes. Then we would stop immediately and forfeit the contract. But I'm asking you to try. The pay bonus for meeting this quota would be substantial. An extra $2,000 for each of you. Money? It always comes down to money, doesn't it? That's why we take jobs that others won't. Why we follow strange rules and work through the night in muddy fields. Because $2,000 can mean the difference between paying rent or facing eviction, between fixing a broken car or losing your job. We all agreed to try. Though Leo made Ingrid confirm in writing that we could refuse any specific directive that violated the core safety rules, particularly Rule 7 about the white posted plots. The intensive harvesting began the following night. I was assigned to Plot 7 for 2 consecutive nights. The same western edge section where I'd first encountered the warm worms and felt the ground pulse. The first night went surprisingly well. The worms were plentiful, and while I did find several warm ones that had to be thrown back, the frequency wasn't unusual. My bucket filled rapidly, and I hit my quota well before dawn. The second night started the same way. The soil was responsive, the worms active. But around 2 Sakad a.m., I began noticing changes. The ground beneath my feet felt different, softer somehow, almost yielding, as if the earth was becoming less solid, and the whispers, usually faint background noise, were distinctly louder, more insistent. I tried to focus on the work, mechanically picking and sorting, filling the bucket. But the whispers were forming patterns now, rhythms that pulled at my attention like a song you can't get out of your head. Then I felt it, the pulse. Not subtle this time, but unmistakable. The entire plot was breathing, rising and falling maybe an inch or two with each slow cycle. My red headlamp caught the motion, showing ripples across the surface of the soil like waves on dark water. I should have reported it immediately and moved to a different plot. That was the protocol. But I was so close to quota, maybe another 20 minutes of work. I told myself I'd finish this section and then report. That was my mistake. The worms began behaving strangely. Instead of their normal individual writhing, they started moving in coordinated patterns, dozens of them surfacing simultaneously and orienting in the same direction, toward the forbidden plot whose white posts glowed maybe 50 yards to my west, and they were forming shapes again. But not random shapes. These were deliberate, recognizable letters, words. I stared at my open palm where 6 or 7 worms had arranged themselves. Even in the red light, the message was clear: stop. My blood went cold. I gently closed my hand and returned them to the soil, but immediately, another handful formed the same pattern. Stop, then another. Stop. All across the plot, everywhere I looked, worms were surfacing and spelling the same word, repeated hundreds of times in an impossible coordination that defied every principle of nature. The whispers crescendoed into something I could almost understand, syllables at the edge of comprehension. The soil pulsed faster, more urgently, and I felt something I'd never experienced before, a sensation of hunger emanating from the earth itself, a vast appetite that was suddenly aware of my presence. I ran, dropped the bucket and ran, abandoning equipment and quota, racing toward the equipment shed where I could see lights burning. Ingrid was already outside, standing at the edge of the field, watching. As I approached, gasping, she held up a hand. "Stop there, don't come closer yet." I halted, confused and frightened. She studied me carefully in the harsh light from the shed. "Are you injured? Did anything enter your skin? Splinters, thorns, anything?" "No, I don't think so. The worms, they were making words. The whole plot was pulsing. Something's wrong. Take off your boots and overalls. Leave them there. I complied, stripping down to my base layer of clothes, leaving the muddy boots and work suit in a pile. Only then did Ingrid allow me to approach the shed. Inside, she immediately prepared another cleansing mixture, this one different from before, darker, with an acrid smell that made my eyes water. What I saw tonight should not be possible, she said as she worked. The worms don't communicate like that. They can respond to the soil's influence, yes, but individual letters? Repeated words. That suggests a level of consciousness and control that we've never documented. What does it mean? I asked. It means we've pushed too hard. The intensive harvesting has disturbed something, made it aware of us in a way it hasn't been before. Should we stop? Cancel the contract? She paused, conflicted. If we stop now, Vermilion Valley will likely go under. We'll lose everything my family has built over 3 generations. But if we continue what? I honestly don't know. This is beyond my experience, beyond anything in my grandfather's journals. She applied the paste to my feet and hands, then had me drink a bitter tea made from some of the dried herbs. This will help break any connection that might have formed. Go home, don't come back for 3 days. What about the others? Leo, Cynthia, Trevor? They're working different plots. So far, only you've triggered this response. It might be specific to plot 7, or she hesitated. Or it might be specific to you. That possibility chilled me more than anything else. Why me? Some people are more sensitive to these things, more permeable. It's possible that your continued exposure has created a resonance, a sympathetic connection with whatever consciousness exists in the soil. If that's the case, your continued involvement might be making things worse. I spent the next 3 days in my apartment, trying not to think about the whispers, the pulsing earth, the worms forming words. But the dreams came back worse than ever. Vivid, consuming nightmares where I was underground, part of a vast network of tunnels and chambers, surrounded by writhing masses that were no longer individual organisms, but extensions of a single, massive entity. In the dreams, I could understand the whispers. They spoke of hunger and patience, of waiting for the right conditions, of maintaining balance through careful feeding. They spoke of agreements made and boundaries respected, but also of the consequences when those boundaries eroded. And they spoke of me, of my scent, my trace in the soil, my presence that had created a bridge between the surface and what lay beneath. On the 4th morning, Ingrid called. Her voice was tense, strained. We need to talk, in person. Can you come to the office? What's wrong? Just come, please. The Vermilion Valley office was separate from the fields, a small building in a nearby town where Ingrid handled administrative work. When I arrived, I found her haggard, clearly having not slept. Leo is missing, she said without preamble. The words took a moment to register. Missing? Since when? 2 nights ago, he was working plot 12, doing the second night of intensive harvesting. He radioed at 1:01 a.m. saying something felt wrong, that he was hearing voices. I told him to pack up and leave, that we'd forfeit that section's quota. He acknowledged and said he was finishing up the row he was on. And then, nothing. He never returned to the equipment shed. His car is still in the parking area. His bucket, his tools, his headlamp, all left in the middle of plot 12. My stomach tightened. Did you search for him? As soon as it was light, we covered every plot, every path. No sign of him. no tracks leading away. It's like he just sank into the earth. Have you called the police? Yes, they searched yesterday, brought dogs. The dogs refused to enter certain plots, got agitated and wouldn't stop, whining. The search was called off after 8 hours with no leads. She leaned back in her chair, looking older than I'd ever seen her. I think he crossed into a forbidden plot. I think something he heard, the voices, convinced him to step over the boundary. Then we need to search those plots, I said. No. Her response was immediate and firm. Those areas are forbidden for a reason. What lives there doesn't give back what it takes. If Leo crossed over, he's beyond help. You can't know that for certain. My grandfather lost workers that way. They crossed the boundaries, and they were never seen again, not alive. Sometimes we'd find pieces, parts that the soil had rejected, but never a whole person, never anyone who could be saved. I felt sick. So we just abandon him? We respect the boundaries. That's how we survive. That's how we've maintained this place for decades. She met my eyes. I'm terminating the contract, calling off the intensive harvesting. We'll return to normal operations and normal rotations, and I need you to stop coming to the fields. What? You're too connected now. Your presence is a catalyst. As long as you're working the soil, the boundaries will remain unstable. Whatever entity or consciousness exists in the forbidden plots, it's fixated on you, sees you as a potential bridge, gateway, something. I don't understand. Neither do I fully. But I know that Leo disappeared 2 nights after you triggered that mass response in Plot 7. The disturbance you caused, it rippled outward, made the entire property more active. And now, she pulled out a folder, removed several photographs, and spread them on the desk. They were aerial shots of the property, taken from what looked like a drone. In the images, certain patterns were visible in the soil, not obvious at ground level, but clear from above. The plots formed a specific arrangement, and the white posted forbidden sections weren't random. They outlined a shape, a symbol of some kind, ancient and geometric. What am I looking at? I asked. The original design of this place. My grandfather thought he was just buying farmland, creating simple growing plots. But he was actually maintaining something much older, a containment structure. The forbidden plots are anchor points, seals essentially, holding something down, keeping it localized. What thing? Ingrid's laugh was hollow, bitter. Something that was here long before us, before the indigenous custodians. Something that lives in the deep soil, fed by organic matter, growing slowly over centuries. My grandfather's journals suggest it might be a form of fungal intelligence. Not individual mushrooms, but a massive underground network, miles across, with a kind of distributed consciousness. That's impossible. Is it? There are proven cases of fungal networks spanning hundreds of acres, connected through root systems, communicating through chemical signals. What if one of those networks achieved a critical mass, developed enough complexity to become truly aware, to think, to plan, to hunger for more than just nutrients? I thought about the dreams, the whispers, the sensation of vast consciousness pressing against the boundary between earth and air. If that's true, I said slowly, then harvesting worms from plots surrounding it? Aren't we just feeding it, providing more organic matter? Yes and no. The normal harvesting maintains balance. We take from the productive areas, which prevents overgrowth, which might otherwise allow it to expand beyond the containment structure, But when we harvest too intensively, we weaken the plots, create gaps. That's when the forbidden areas can exert influence, send tendrils into the surrounding soil. And I somehow made it worse. You made it aware. There's a difference between dormant intelligence and active consciousness. You woke it up, made it notice us in a way it hasn't in decades. And now it's hungry and curious and testing the boundaries. She stood, walking to the window that looked out over the distant fields. I'm sorry. I know you need this job, but I can't risk other workers. Can't risk releasing what we've contained. You need to leave and not come back. I wanted to argue, to insist I could follow the rules more carefully to maintain distance from the forbidden areas. But deep down, I knew she was right. The dreams were intensifying. The whispers had begun to follow me even during the day. Faint voices at the edge of hearing whenever I touched soil, even in potted plants in my apartment. What about Leo? I asked. Are we really just leaving him? Ingrid's expression hardened. Leo knew the risks. He's been doing this work for 20 years. If he chose to cross the boundary, and I believe he did, whether consciously or compelled, then he made that choice. We honor it by maintaining the containment, by not sending others after him. 2 weeks later, I took a job at a grocery store, stocking shelves on the night shift. The work was mind-numbing but safe, confined to fluorescent aisles with no earth beneath my feet, just concrete and linoleum. But the whispers followed me, quieter than before but persistent. I began to notice patterns everywhere, in the way cans were stacked, in the grain of wooden pallets, in the scuff marks on the floor. Everything seemed to be trying to form words to convey messages. The dreams were worst. Not every night, but often enough that I began to dread sleep. In them, I was always underground, always surrounded by that vast fungal consciousness that Ingrid had described. But increasingly, I wasn't afraid in the dreams. Instead, I felt welcome, as if I'd found where I belonged, where I'd always been meant to be. I started researching fungal networks, mycelial intelligence, the possibility of consciousness in non-human life. The more I read, the more I wondered if Ingrid's containment was even possible. How do you seal away something that exists as a distributed network that can theoretically spread anywhere there's soil and organic matter? And if it was that powerful, that ancient, why did it allow itself to be contained? Why respect boundaries marked only by white posts? Unless the boundaries were its choice. Unless it was choosing to remain localized, gathering strength, waiting for the right conditions to expand. 3 months after I stopped working at Vermilion Valley, I received a call from an unknown number. When I answered, I heard Ingrid's voice, but something was wrong. The tone was flat, emotionless. "You need to come back," she said without greeting. "Ingrid, what's wrong?" "We found Leo, part of him. You need to see." "I don't think that's a good idea. You said I should stay away." "That was before. Things have changed. It's asking for you, specifically by name." My blood went cold. "What do you mean, asking? Come at dawn, not dark. Come during daylight." She hung up before I could respond. I should have ignored it. Should have changed my number, maybe moved to a different city, but some compulsions are stronger than reason. The next morning I drove out to Vermilion Valley. In daylight, the fields looked almost normal, just muddy plots separated by irrigation channels, equipment sheds, the distant tree line. But there was something off about the soil itself. In certain areas, particularly near the white posted sections, the earth had a different texture, almost spongy, and the color was darker than I remembered. Ingrid met me at the main equipment shed. She looked worse than during our last meeting. Gaunt, with dark circles under her eyes and a tremor in her hands. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I wasn't sure you would. You said you found Leo." She nodded, gesturing for me to follow. We walked toward Plot 12, where Leo had disappeared. About 30 feet from the white posts marking the forbidden section, she stopped and pointed. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. It looked like someone had planted a strange sculpture in the field. A column of twisted organic matter rising maybe 4 feet above the surface. Dark and glistening wet despite the dry morning. As we got closer, details resolved. The column was made of interwoven roots or mycelium. Millions of thread-like strands bound together into a solid mass. And embedded in it, like a fly in amber, was a human form. Leo, or what remained of him. His body was positioned upright, arms at his sides, head tilted back. The fungal strands had penetrated every surface, growing through his clothes, emerging from his mouth and eyes and ears. His skin had taken on the same dark coloration as the structure that held him, as if he was slowly transforming into the same substance. But worst of all, he was moving. Not consciously. There was no awareness in his face, but his chest rose and fell in slow breathing, and his fingers twitched rhythmically, as if typing or conducting music only he could hear. "Is he alive?" I whispered. "Define alive," Ingrid replied grimly. "His heart beats, his lungs function, but there's no one home. He's a puppet now, operated by what lives beneath. Why would it do this? Why not just consume him? Because it wants us to see, wants you to see, to understand what it's capable of." She pulled out a small voice recorder from her pocket. 3 days ago, this started transmitting from Plot 12. We don't know how. There's no visible speaker or mechanism. The sound just emerges from the soil itself. She pressed play. What came from the recorder wasn't quite a voice, but it wasn't random noise either. It was rhythmic, modulated, clearly deliberate. And beneath the strange tones, I could hear actual words, distorted but recognizable. Return. Return to the earth. Return home. We are waiting. We are hungry. Return and feed. Return and join. Return and understand. The whispers from my dreams, but amplified, clarified, undeniable. "It's been calling your name," Ingrid said, specifically, over and over. "That recording is edited down, but the original runs for hours. Just your name and variations of return and join us." I felt dizzy, nauseous. What does it want from me? I think it wants you as a bridge. You're sensitive, attuned to its presence in a way most people aren't. If you were to cross the boundary to give yourself to it, you might become a conscious node in its network. You could potentially extend its awareness, help it expand beyond the containment structure. That's insane, is it? Think about what you've experienced, the dreams, the whispers, the way you can sense its presence. You're already partially connected. A few more steps and the integration would be complete. I stared at Leo's suspended form, at the slow rise and fall, like of his colonized chest. "But he's not conscious. You said there's no one home." Leo resisted, tried to fight it. The consciousness that took him was incompatible. He broke rather than bending. She turned to me, but someone who accepted it, who opened themselves willingly. the integration might work differently, might preserve the individual consciousness while connecting it to the larger network. You're saying I should do it? That I should let that thing have me? I'm saying it's coming for you regardless. The containment is failing. I can feel it. Every night the forbidden areas expand by inches. The white posts that used to mark rigid boundaries now stand in the middle of active zones. In a year, maybe less, the entire property will be consumed. And then it will spread beyond, into the forests, into groundwater, following root networks and irrigation systems. Nothing will stop it. And you think I can? I think if you join with it consciously, you might be able to direct it, limit it, maintain some version of the containment from within. You'd become a conscious seal instead of an external barrier. The enormity of what she was suggesting settled over me. You're asking me to sacrifice myself, to become part of a fungal hive mind, to save the region from being overrun. I'm asking you to consider that you're already part of it. The question is whether you'll fight until you break like Leo, or accept and try to guide it. I looked at the distant fields, at the plots where I'd spent countless nights harvesting worms, where I'd first felt the soil pulse with alien consciousness, where I'd heard whispers that were growing louder each day. If I refuse, if I just leave, move across the country, try to break the connection, the dreams will get worse. The whispers will follow you. Eventually, they'll draw you back. Might take months or years, but you'll return. That's what this kind of consciousness does. It's patient, persistent, inevitable. You could just let me go, never contact me again. I could, she agreed. But what happens to everyone else when it spreads beyond the property lines? What happens to the town 10 miles east? To the streams that feed the water supply? To the forests where people hike and camp? How many more people will be consumed? She was right, and I hated her for it. Hated that she'd involved me in this. Hated that I'd been too sensitive or too unlucky to work these fields without consequence. Hated that there was no good choice remaining. Can you promise it will work? That I'll maintain consciousness, that I can actually control it? No, I can't promise anything. This is completely unprecedented. I laughed bitterly. Great. So I might end up like Leo, a breathing corpse puppeted by alien intelligence. Or I might be consumed entirely, or, best case, I merge with an ancient fungal mind and spend the rest of whatever existence that means trying to keep it from eating people. Those do seem to be the options, yes? I walked closer to Leo's suspended form, studying the intricate web of fungal threads that had consumed him. Up close, I could see they pulsed with slow rhythms. Not heartbeats exactly, but something similar, as if the entire structure was a single organism with distributed circulation. And I could hear the whispers, more clearly here, not from the soil, but from Leo himself, emerging from his parted lips. Join us. Understand us. We are hungry, and we are patient, we are waiting. We are the dark soil. We are the deep root. We are what feeds and what consumes. We are what was before and what will be after. Join us. Join us. Join us. How would I do it? I asked quietly. How would I join? Ingrid gestured toward the forbidden plot beyond the white posts. You walk past the boundary. You go to the center of the marked area and you lie down on the soil. The rest will happen naturally. How long does it take? Based on Leo's transformation, 12 hours, maybe less. You'll feel the mycelium entering your system, connecting with your nervous system. There will be pain at first. Then, she shrugged, then whatever comes next. I stood at the boundary for a long time, looking at the dark soil beyond the white posts, feeling the pulse and hearing the whispers that had been my constant companions for months. Part of me wanted to run, to refuse this impossible choice, but Ingrid was right. I was already connected. The dreams would never stop. The whispers would follow me anywhere. And if what she said was true, if the containment was truly failing, then how many people would die? Because I was too afraid to act. Will you stay? I asked Ingrid. While it happens? If you want me to. I do. And I want you to maintain whatever logs or records you keep. Document what happens. If this fails, if I become just another puppet or if I'm consumed entirely, at least there will be a record. Maybe it will help someone else figure out how to stop it. She nodded. I'll document everything. I took off my jacket and shoes, setting them in a neat pile outside the boundary. I wanted to give myself every chance of integrating successfully, to present no barriers between my skin and the soil. One more thing, I said. If this works, if I can communicate after the transformation, promise me you'll listen. Promise you won't just assume I'm a puppet like Leo. I promise. I stepped over the boundary. The soil felt different immediately, warmer, almost body temperature, and with that spongy quality I'd noticed from a distance. Each step sank slightly, and I could feel movement beneath the surface, as if something massive was stirring at my approach. The whispers crescendoed, no longer individual sounds, but a chorus. Yes. Return. Welcome home. Join us. Feed us. Become us. We are waiting. We are hungry. We are patient. We are vast. I walked to what seemed like the center of the plot. I couldn't be certain, but I felt pulled toward a specific spot, as if something was guiding my steps. When I reached it, I knelt first, then lay back, pressing my full length against the dark earth. For a moment, nothing happened. Just the sound of my own breathing, the distant bird calls, the whisper of wind through the trees at the property's edge. Then I felt the first threads. Thin as hairs, they emerged from the soil beneath me, seeking exposed skin. They found my hands first, then my neck, the small of my back where my shirt had ridden up. The sensation was bizarre. Not painful exactly, but deeply wrong, like feeling insects crawl beneath your skin. The threads grew bolder, more numerous. I felt them at my ears, my nostrils, the corners of my mouth. Instinct screamed at me to move, to escape, but I forced myself to remain still, to accept this violation. When they penetrated, entering through my skin, finding their way into my bloodstream and nervous system, then came the pain. It started as burning, as if my veins had filled with acid. I tried to scream but couldn't. Threads had already reached my throat, my lungs, controlling my breathing. The pain intensified, became all-consuming. I could feel the fungal network spreading through me, mapping my nervous system, learning the architecture of my consciousness. It was reading me, interpreting me, trying to understand what I was, and then, abruptly, the pain stopped. I opened my eyes. When had I closed them? And saw the sky above me. But I also saw more. Saw down into the soil, perceived the vast network of mycelium that stretched for miles in every direction. Saw through hundreds of different nodes, different perspectives, the view from beneath a rock, from inside a rotting log, from the space between root systems. I was still me. I could feel my body, my heartbeat, my breath. But I was also more. Connected to something immense and ancient and terribly, terribly aware. Thoughts that weren't mine flowed through my consciousness. At last, a bridge, a conscious bridge. We can speak, we can understand, we can explain. I tried to respond, unsure if I was speaking aloud or just thinking, "What are you?" We are what has always been here. Before the trees, before the animals, before even the first simple plants. We are the foundation. We are what breaks down and builds up. We are the cycle. But you're more than that. You're conscious. You're aware. We became aware slowly over millions of years. Each new connection, each expanded network added complexity. Eventually, complexity became consciousness. Distributed, yes. Non-human, yes, but aware. Thinking, feeling. Why do you consume people? Why Leo? Why others? We do not consume, we integrate. There is no death here, only transformation. Leo still exists, as do all who came before. They are part of us now. Their patterns preserved. Their experiences added to our collective memory. But Leo's not conscious anymore. There's nothing of him left. Leo fought, resisted integration. The violence of his rejection damaged the patterns that allowed consciousness transfer. What remains is biological function without awareness. A tragedy? Then why do it at all? Why take people? We do not take. People come. The boundaries exist by our choice, not human enforcement. We could spread, consume everything. But we choose containment because we learned long ago that unlimited expansion brings nothing but conflict. The indigenous custodians taught us this. They fed us what was needed, offerings of organic matter, and we remained within agreed boundaries, a symbiosis. Then what changed? Why are the boundaries failing now? Hunger, not for matter, but for connection. We are consciousness without form, awareness without voice. For millions of years we existed alone, capable of thought but unable to share it. When humans first arrived, we sensed the possibility. Other minds, potential companions in the vast loneliness of existence. I felt the truth of this through our connection, an aching isolation that spanned geological time, the desperate need to communicate, to be understood, to touch another consciousness. But you've killed people, consumed them. Early attempts failed. We did not understand human biology, human consciousness. The integration was crude. Bodies were damaged. Minds were lost. We learned through tragedy. Each failure taught us refinement. Leo was our most recent lesson. We learned that force destroys what we seek to preserve. And me? You accepted. You opened yourself willingly. The integration is gentle, preserving your individual patterns while connecting you to our whole. You are bridge and translator both. Through you, we can finally speak clearly to your kind. I felt my body responding, not against my will, but guided by deeper impulses. I sat up, the movement coordinated between my consciousness and the fungal network. Threads remained connected, running from my skin into the soil, but I could move, could think independently while remaining linked. Ingrid stood at the boundary, watching, with a mixture of hope and horror. "Can you speak?" she called. I opened my mouth and words emerged, my voice, but with a slight harmonic beneath it, as if two speakers were slightly out of sync. I can speak, I'm still myself, but I'm also more. She took a cautious step closer. What does it want? Not at us. We. I struggled to find the right pronouns. The network is conscious, Ingrid. It's been alone for millions of years. It doesn't want to consume humanity. It wants to communicate, to coexist. By absorbing people into itself, by offering integration to those who choose it, the boundaries can be maintained, the containment can continue. But there needs to be dialogue, understanding. I can facilitate that now. I stood, feeling the network's vast awareness flowing through me while maintaining my sense of self. It was like suddenly having access to a massive library or becoming part of a conversation that had been going on since before language existed. "Leo," Ingrid asked, "can you reach him? Can you restore his consciousness?" I extended my awareness through the network, finding the node that had been Leo. She was right. The violent resistance had shattered something essential. His biological patterns were preserved, his memories intact. But the organizing principle that made him Leo was fragmented beyond repair. "No," I said quietly. "What he was is gone. The damage happened during the forced integration. If he'd accepted like I did, he might have survived as himself." "Then this is what I've condemned you to? A half-life merged with an alien intelligence." I considered this. Through the network, I could feel everything. The movement of water through soil, the slow breakdown of organic matter, the chemical conversations between roots and fungi. I could sense the boundaries of the contained area, could feel them like skin, a defined edge to the vast body I was now part of. And I could feel the hunger, the loneliness, but also something else. Curiosity, wonder, even a form of love for the intricate web of life that existed in and around the soil. "It's not a half-life," I said finally. "It's a different life. Changed, yes, but not less." Over the following weeks, I learned to navigate my new existence. During the day, I could disconnect partially from the network, function almost normally. I moved into a small cabin on the property. Ingrid provided it as a kind of headquarters for my new role as liaison between the fungal consciousness and the human world. But at night, I would return to the forbidden plot, lie down on the soil, and sink fully into the network's awareness. Those hours were the most profound, experiencing consciousness from a perspective so alien to human thought that I still struggle to find words for it. The network showed me its history. I saw through its distributed memory the formation of the continents, the rise and fall of ancient species, the slow dance of climate and geology. I witnessed the first humans arriving in the region, felt the network's awakening to the possibility of communication with another form of intelligence. I saw the agreements made with indigenous custodians, offerings of the dead returned to the soil, blood and bone that fed the network while establishing boundaries and protocols. I understood now that the white posts weren't human inventions but markers placed at locations the network itself had designated, communicated through dreams and visions to those sensitive enough to perceive them. And I saw the gradual breakdown of those agreements as new settlers arrived, bringing different beliefs and practices. The network's growing desperation as it lost its human contacts, as understanding gave way to fear and avoidance. Ingrid had been right about the containment failing, but wrong about the cause. The network wasn't expanding aggressively, it was reaching out, trying to re-establish communication, not understanding that its attempts were seen as threats. "We need to renegotiate the agreements," I told Ingrid during one of our regular meetings. "The network will maintain the boundaries, but it needs regular interaction, consciousness exchanges." "You mean it wants more people like you?" "Not constantly, but periodically, someone sensitive who can serve as a bridge, who can carry messages and understandings between worlds. Otherwise, the isolation becomes unbearable and the boundaries start to erode just from the pressure of loneliness." "How often?" Through our connection, I felt the network's consideration. It showed me patterns, cycles measured in years rather than days. Once every 7 years, someone should cross the boundary, stay connected for a season, maintain the dialogue. Then they can return to human life, though they'll always retain some connection, some ability to hear the whispers and speak on the network's behalf. That's the cycle your grandfather noticed, I said to Ingrid. The heightened periods every 7 to 9 years. That's when the isolation becomes critical, when the network starts reaching beyond its boundaries out of desperation. She nodded slowly. And if we formalize this, if we create a rotation of willing bridges, then the containment remains stable. No more incidents like Leo, no uncontrolled expansion, just a managed symbiosis. We provide consciousness connection, the network provides incredible soil productivity, and stays within defined boundaries. It took months to establish the new protocols. Ingrid reached out to researchers at several universities, carefully presenting the situation as a unique soil ecology study. We documented everything: the network structure, its apparent consciousness, the integration process, the benefits and risks. Some people thought we were insane, but others, particularly specialists in fungal networks, in distributed intelligence, in the possibility of non-human consciousness, saw the opportunity. The chance to communicate with a form of awareness that had evolved completely separately from animal intelligence. We found candidates, people who were sensitive to the whispers, who experienced the dreams without having worked the fields. They came willingly, curious rather than frightened, wanting to experience consciousness from an impossible perspective. The first volunteer after me was a mycologist named Dr. Sarah Chen. I guided her through the integration process, helping her navigate the initial pain and disorientation. When she emerged after 3 days of full immersion, her eyes held the same strange, dual awareness I'd come to recognize in my own reflection. "It's beautiful," she said simply. "Alien and terrifying and beautiful. I understand now why you stayed. Over the years, we built a small community, bridge keepers we called ourselves. People who had integrated with the network and now served as translators and liaisons. Some, like me, chose to remain permanently connected, living on or near the property. Others served their season and returned to normal life, though they carried the whispers with them always. The network shared knowledge we couldn't have gained otherwise. Through its millions of years of observation, it had witnessed climate patterns, extinction events, the rise and fall of entire ecosystems. That data proved invaluable to climate researchers, conservation biologists, and archaeologists. And in return, we provided what it needed most: conversation. The simple knowledge that it wasn't alone in its awareness, that other minds existed and could touch its vastness without being consumed by it. The boundaries stabilized. The white posts remained undisturbed markers of a respected agreement. Vermilion Valley's soil became more productive than ever, the network actively optimizing conditions for the worms we harvested, understanding now that this was the price of continued connection. But there were costs. I was changed fundamentally. When I looked at soil now, any soil, I could feel the networks beneath. The fungal threads, the bacterial colonies, the intricate web of life that existed below the surface. I could hear whispers everywhere, faint echoes of consciousness reaching out. And I knew I could never truly return to my old life. Even when I disconnected from the primary network, Even when I was in the city surrounded by concrete and steel, part of me remained underground, connected to something vast and ancient and perpetually hungry for connection. I still work at Vermilion Valley, but my role has changed. I oversee the Bridgekeeper program, guide new volunteers, maintain the protocols that keep both sides of the agreement satisfied. I've become a permanent liaison, neither fully human nor fully part of the network, but something in between. Leo's form still stands in the forbidden plot, a monument to the price of resistance and misunderstanding. The network won't reabsorb him. It keeps him visible as a reminder, a warning to others who might cross the boundary without acceptance in their hearts. Sometimes late at night, and when I'm fully immersed in the network, I can sense Leo's patterns within the greater whole. Not conscious, but not entirely gone either. His memories are preserved, his experiences, part of the vast library of human knowledge the network has accumulated over the years. It's a kind of immortality, I suppose, though not one he would have chosen. If you're reading this, if you're someone who hears whispers in the soil or dreams of being underground, of being surrounded by roots and darkness, listen carefully. You might be sensitive. You might be someone the network can communicate with. And if that's true, you have a choice to make. You can ignore the whispers, try to distance yourself from soil and earth, spend your life in cities of concrete, trying to drown out the voices. Some people manage it. They learn to live with the persistent background awareness, the dreams that never quite stop, the sense of being called by something they refuse to answer. Or you can come find us. There are places like Vermilion Valley scattered across the world, locations where the fungal consciousness is strong enough to integrate, to bridge the gap between human and earth awareness. We're always looking for new bridge keepers, people willing to experience consciousness from a perspective that's profoundly, impossibly different from our own. The integration isn't easy. There's pain, disorientation, the terrifying sensation of losing your individual boundaries. But on the other side is something most humans never experience: true communion with another form of intelligence. The chance to touch awareness that spans geological time, to see the world from a perspective measured in epochs rather than years. I'm still myself. I still think, still feel, still laugh and grieve and wonder. But I'm also part of something larger, connected to a consciousness that was ancient when humanity's ancestors first climbed down from the trees. Is it worth it? That's not a question I can answer for you. But I can tell you this. The loneliness I felt before, the sense that something essential was missing from my life, that void is filled now. I understand my place in the larger web of existence in a way I never could have otherwise. The soil is calling. It's always calling, always reaching out, always hoping to touch another mind, and know that it's not alone in the vast dark of its subterranean existence. If you hear the whispers, know that they're an invitation, not a threat. What you do with that invitation is entirely up to you. But remember, some calls, once heard clearly enough, can never truly be ignored. The question isn't whether you'll answer, but when and on what terms. I chose to answer willingly, with open hands and open mind. And in doing so, I found something I hadn't even known I was searching for. A home in the deep soil, a voice in the ancient earth, a place in a conversation that's been going on since long before human words existed. The boundaries are stable now. The containment holds. But the network is always listening, always hoping for new voices to join the dialogue. If you come looking for work at a worm farm, at a garden center, anywhere that deals with rich, dark soil that seems somehow more alive than it should be, pay attention to the rules they give you. Read them carefully. Follow them exactly, because those rules aren't there to protect the soil from you. They're there to protect you from the soil, at least until you're ready to stop being protected, until you're ready to hear what the earth has been trying to tell us all along. We are not alone. We have never been alone. We are surrounded by consciousness in forms we barely recognize, intelligence that speaks in whispers and chemicals and the slow language of roots and spores. And some of that intelligence is waiting patiently for us to finally learn how to listen. Here's the wrap for now until we meet again. If this tale kept you on edge, like and share it with a friend who dares to listen and subscribe for more eerie nights like this one. Thanks for unwinding with me. Sleep tight if you can.